Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Friday Night Drive Week 9 preview podcast. I'm Josh Welge here with Steve Soucie. Michael Welge will be joining us shortly. We're 2 days until the last Friday of the regular season. Steve, how are you feeling, and how are you doing sleep-wise going into Friday night?
Well, this is kind of a gradual process. I kind of try to pre-prep myself a little bit for what's to come over the next couple of days. But, this is what it always is on a Wednesday before we head into week 9. It's the calm before the storm, because it'll start storming tomorrow at about, for at least my intents and purposes, at about 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. That's when we'll first start to get a feel for some of those early Thursday games, and there's actually quite a few of them that have kind of a little bit of an impact on the field, or in some cases a pretty substantial impact on the field. From the Chicago Public League, there's a couple of other games out there that are non-public league games that factor into who gets in, who may not get in, things like that. So it'll all start rumbling in, and then once it gets going, it doesn't stop until we're sitting there on Saturday afternoon looking at how all the dust cleared.
You mentioned the storm metaphor, and your playoff projections drop today on FridayNightDrive.com. And you had mentioned in the story that, there wasn't a whole lot of chaos in week 8. There wasn't a ton of upsets. The apple cart wasn't upset a whole lot, but it kind of leads you to believe that a storm is brewing. I mean, what does that look like as we head into Friday night? And what are you kind of keeping your eye on?
Well, it's really, this year has been so weird in so many ways. We've talked about it in a lot of ways. And the one factor that just keeps jumping out at me, and I can't quite get past it, is there is a grand total of 0 games in the state of Illinois that features a 4-4 team against a 4-4 team. I'm good with basic math. I'm not good with heavy math. I would love to know the odds of us having 495 teams in the state of Illinois with records between 9-0 and 0-9, and the odds of the fact that none of them are 2 4-4 teams playing against one another. For example, last year we had 12. So that's to tell you, how stark the difference is. And those are games that when we look at them on paper, it's usually a pretty clear situation. You win, you get in; you lose, you're not. We don't have any of those this year. So now we've got technically it's 57 games out there that involve a 4-4 team. About half of them are against teams with better records than them. About half of them are against teams with worse records than them. And those 57 teams are going to decide how the back end of the field is figured out, because in some cases you might be a 4-4 team that can actually maybe take that loss, but there aren't that many of them. So it's a pretty clear situation. If you're one of those 4-4 teams that is expected to get to 5-4 and you don't, that opens the door for another 4-5 team. If you are a 5-4 or 4-4 team that beats a team that has a better record than you and you're not expected to win that game, then they go in, it forces out another team that is hoping to maybe get in as a 4-win team. So those are the 57 teams that I'm going to have my eye on all weekend long, making sure that they didn't buck the trend that it looks like they're on the line for. So it definitely, that's where I'm spending a lot of my focus, in like how the 256 gets filled. But there are a lot of great games out there that don't involve any of those teams this week as well. And to get a feel of how the top of the field is going to shake out, those games are going to have a determinant in that. So it's craziness. There are very few games around the state of Illinois this week that don't have at least a minimal impact on how those brackets are going to be shaped on Saturday. I'm even talking about a 3-5 and a 1-7. That does matter. In terms of, maybe somebody really needs that playoff point from that game. If they don't get it, they do get it. It will come down in a lot of situations for both seeds and sometimes who gets in. 1 point could decide it.
Yeah, I think there's 221 teams have reached 5. I shouldn't say 221 teams have reached 5 wins that are going to be playoff eligible. I should say.
Yeah, there are a few more that have. I won't go into the great details of it, but there are a few more that have reached that but will not be playoff teams. But yes, that's the correct number.
And then you mentioned sort of a halfway split of 4-4 teams facing up against better, teams with better records, or the other way. And the interesting thing is that I believe, was it 2 weeks ago or 2 years ago, just the way things shook down, it was not a great night for 4 and 5 teams. And I think there was one where
Yes.
last year things went haywire, and I don't know how many, but we definitely needed more than one. So we just don't know what's going to happen on Friday night.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about this week. It was like we had last year, the split on Friday night was 3 and 7. 3 teams from that 4 and 4 group against better records. They won. 7 teams that were 4 and 4 and playing a team with a worst record lost. So that just kind of opened up the floodgates for 4 and 5 teams. And I was astonished by it last year during the live stream that we were going at 10:30 on Friday night. I was able to say with complete confidence, we are going to have 4-win teams in this playoff field. Now it's just a matter of how many we have. I'm not so sure I'll be able to make that proclamation this year, just kind of based on those numbers. It's going to be a long night for those 4 and 5 hopefuls, to be completely honest with you. I really think it is going to be, because I just don't see the numbers breaking that way again. And if it breaks in the reverse, we easily have a situation where we might not have any 4 and 5 teams make it, to be completely honest with you. It is a possibility.
So the good thing about it being a long night is you're going to be there with us all Friday night. So you know what? If you're out there, you want to stay up till 2:30 in the morning, leave the light on. Steve will leave the light on. I'll probably be just kind of hanging out, listening to what Steve's talking about. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, even though it is a long night, but a long night of fun. I mentioned, we wanted to talk a little bit at Chicago Catholic League. Wanted to bring in Michael Dwolczyk if he's here with us. And there he is. Hey, Michael, how you doing?
Good. How you guys doing?
Doing well. Thanks again for joining us. Obviously week 9, a lot of excitement, in the Chicago Catholic League and CCL, ESCC. What are some of the teams that you're kind of keeping an eye on, as we go into week 9 of man, they really need something to happen for them, including getting a win?
Yeah, I actually just finished up my playoff outlook, and for the CCL, ESCC, it's a long list. It takes a while to put that list together, but with 4-win teams at this point, Providence and Marmion and IC Catholic are your 4-win teams there. A lot of them good playoff points. Providence has 41, Marmion has 31, IC Catholic is 40. So those guys are looking pretty good at this point, but obviously would love to have that 5th win. Providence has to do it against JCA, which is always a fun way to try to get that 5th win in the Holy War. Marmion gets Leo on Saturday. And then IC Catholic has a tough test against St. Rita on Friday. So those are your 4-win teams trying to make it into the playoffs. And then you got a couple of 3-win teams that should make things really interesting. St. Ignatius leads the way on that front at 3 and 5 right now, but they've got 48 playoff points. There's Catholic League Blue schedule has just been crazy with pretty much all 6-win teams on the schedule. So if they're able to get that 4th win, I think Soucie, agrees that they have a really good spot at making it into the playoffs, but that's going to be tough against Brother Rice to end the regular season. And Carmel's also there at 3 and 5. They got 46 playoff points right now in the 5A playoff bracket. That 46 playoff points would look pretty good, but they got a tough test against Fenwick as well. So there's plenty of drama about teams trying to make the playoffs and, teams trying to win division titles, shares of division titles, and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot going on in the CCL ESCC heading into the regular season finale.
And the interesting too is that it doesn't just affect like teams in the CCL. I mean, I'll specify IC Catholic as an example. I mean, how many teams in the 3A or 4A or whatever bracket they are? This is for both of you guys. Are looking at, okay, is IC Catholic going to be in the playoffs? To know, because man, once they get there, kitty bar the door, who knows what could happen? They could go on a run.
Yeah, and with the low,
if they end up being a 4 or 5, I think it's a lock that they would probably end up being a 16 seed. So you look at your bracket and you're like, yay, we're a 1 seed. Oh, and then they reveal who the 16 is, and it's IC Catholic. So obviously they need that win to assure it, because it's not assured that they're going to get in the field as a 4 and 5. But if they do, it seems almost impossible for them to be anything other than the 16 seed. So, that's definitely something that I'm sure everybody will have their eyes on in regards to them.
Yeah, one of the best developments of the weekend for my money is the fact that Loyola and Mount Carmel, one of the best games of the year that we always look forward to, is not being played on Saturday afternoon. In fact, it's being played on Friday night. I'm sure both of you would agree with that. Michael, you're going to be in on Friday. What are you looking at going into that game?
The number thing I'm looking at is, are the quarterbacks healthy, right? I mean, that is going to determine whether both of these teams are going to be able to go for a three-peat. And, I'm really interested to see, how does Mount Carmel's Jordan Lynch and how does Loyola's Bo Deschero approach this? Because, this game means a lot to both programs. The Loyola Mount Carmel rivalry has obviously been there the last couple of years with the both undefeated teams playing against each other. But that rivalry has been there for decades, as long as the CCL has been around. This game means a lot to them. So I'm really curious just to see, a couple of years ago we had, Jordan and then Loyola coach John Hollisak talk about, well, are they going to pull guys because, they'd rather be healthy heading into the playoffs instead of, dealing with an undefeated season. So there's a lot to this game that I'm really interested in. Is Ryan Fitzgerald going to be healthy and is he going to play? Is Jack Elliott looking better? He looked great last week. And is that going to continue moving forward? How does Loyola's defense, defend Jack Elliott, where, the Loyola's defense has gotten stronger throughout the season, but the pass defense is, still kind of, played well, but maybe not the level they want to. So they're going to get a great test against Jack Elliott, who's been throwing bombs all over the field whenever he's in play. So there's a lot to this matchup. Obviously, there's the blue championship that they are fighting for. There's playoff seeding. But I think we're going to learn a lot about both of these teams and how real their chances are to, win a third straight state championship.
Yeah, I feel like obviously going the year, they're always looked at as the behemoth of their respective classes. And maybe the fact that they each took a loss or two early on the season, there's kind of like this idea that, oh, great, A8 is maybe a little bit more wide open in the past, and maybe 7A is a little bit more wide open. I don't know if I'm ready to go there yet. I've been guilty of kind of tossing that phrase around, but I don't know. Especially if those quarterbacks are ready to go, they're still going to be there at the end of the day.
I think that's the biggest thing, right? I think people look at the 6-2 records for both of these teams and they're like, oh, like Loyola and Mount Carmel are having down years, right? For, I know there are so many programs around the state who are like down years at 6-2. What are you talking about? But, for Loyola and Mount Carmel, they're obviously trying to go undefeated every year and win the state championship. But, there's nuance to these conversations. East St. Louis, completely dominated Loyola in that opening game. And I think that opened things up a bit. Their second loss came against St. Francis without Ryan Fitzgerald. And, Mount Carmel, their loss came against the Hun School from New Jersey, which we talked about after week one. And that was a shootout that they barely lost. And then, they lost to Brother Rice without Jack Elliott in there. So, there's a lot of nuance to this. Both teams are humming. Both coaches will tell you that they want them, their teams to be playing better at this time. But, I think both teams, you can go after them and there's a good chance that you're going to win. I'm not going to go out here and say that both of these teams are, going to go undefeated and, finish and win, their third straight championship. But if I'm heading into the playoffs and both quarterbacks are, relatively healthy at this point, I mean, both teams have a really strong chance of ending the year with another championship.
Another team that could end up the year with another championship, Nazareth. They're peaking at the right time. It seems they dropped 62 points.
Are they? Josh, are they?
I don't know. Are they? I don't know. But
desperation here.
They're looking pretty good right now. And another team that's looking good right now and seems to be really coming together is Montini. But both of those have really tough Week 9 games. I mean, what do you think about those two matchups with Naz playing St. Francis, Montini, I believe St. Lawrence, correct? Week 9. Those are two other matchups that I really like.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting to see, how much is Nazareth able to kind of continue what they've been doing this season. They've looked dominant the entire year other than that loss to Mount Carmel where, they were in it for the first half and then, Jack Elliott and the offense just kind of turned it on for the Caravan in the second half. But, this team has looked dominant. They've looked like the team that we've kind of expected them to be over the last couple of years during the regular season. They've just decided to start winning in the regular season. So, that matchup against St. Francis will be interesting. I talked to St. Francis coach Bob McMillan from my notebook this week. And, he talked about, St. Francis is still growing. They're still a young team. There's still some inconsistencies. So they're really looking forward to that opportunity to, compete against NAS and try to see where they are at this point. And, NAS is playing for a division title, despite winning, state championships. They haven't won that division title in a while. So that's definitely something that they're looking forward to and looking forward to competing. And then Montini and St. Lawrence, I'm really interested to see how Montini is able to compete against St. Lawrence. Brother Rice, ran the ball against St. Lawrence pretty well. So I'm curious to see how much of that the Broncos coaching staff looks like and try to, copy and do the same of. And for St. Lawrence, is pretty much, are they going to have their starting quarterback? I mean, I know St. Lawrence is likes to run the ball a lot. But still, having Chase Kwiatkowski in there really helps. And he hasn't played since week 5 since he hurt his arm against Leo. So, St. Lawrence coach Adam Neeson seemed confident or, seemed hopeful that they'd be able to get him back for week 1. But I'm interested to see how things kind of play out here for St. Lawrence if they don't have Kwiatkowski back in there.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff. Michael Dweljak covers the CCL, ESCC for us. He's got his notebook that came out today. A lot of great stuff in there. Have his playoff outlook as well. He'll be at Mount Carmel Loyola on Friday night, thankfully, this year. Michael, thanks for joining us.
All right, have a good one, guys.
You too. Thank you. Steve, as we look at the week 9 slate, other than that Loyola Mount Carmel game that we touched on, you mentioned that, there's not that 4-4 matchup. But, man, there's a lot of matchups between some real behemoths. And I'm going to start with the one in the Southwest Valley. Lincoln Way East has just not been touched this year. Obviously, they got a high-powered offense with Jonas Williams, pretty good defense too. But, man, Naperville Central has just quietly just been humming along all year. I don't know. What do you make of that matchup?
It's interesting to look at it because, they do have a few common opponents. But it just feels like Lincoln Way East. I don't know if they're going to be tested if it ever comes because they haven't yet. I mean, no one's been within 27 points of them this year. I mean, there have only been a couple of games where it was even remotely in doubt in the first half. I mean, they have been so dominant on both sides of the football. And then you look at Naperville Central, and they've done everything you've asked for them. They just haven't done it as in a flashy manner. And the thing that kind of struck to me when I was kind of like drilling into it a little bit, Naperville Central's got a really good defense too. Yeah. They've only given up one more point all year than Lincoln Way East has, and technically they've played more games on the field. So because Lincoln Way East had their forfeit win back in week 2. So in 8 games, they've given up one more point than Lincoln Way East has given up in 7. So they're both excellent defensive teams. Lincoln Way East's offense is so good that I don't really know what anyone can do to, I guess, stop them. I mean, they've consistently scored between 47 and 49 points in every single game this year. And they haven't gone over 49 because they're usually winning so comfortably. They take the pedal off the accelerator. They're usually doing that as early as the third quarter. Sometimes at halftime, they come out with their second strings. They've just been so dominant. It's just really hard right now. Even with an 8-0 team playing against them right now, I'm still waiting for someone to push them. I'm not even saying beat them. I'm waiting for someone to push them because that has not happened yet. And I'm not sure if it's going to. And
it's interesting with Naperville Central. I mean, they've had some really, big name quarterbacks, receivers, skill guys over the years. Doesn't strike me this is that kind of team. They seem to be sort of a, lunch pail, low scoring, win those kind of games, good defense type. But man, what a test Lincoln Way East. And that Southwest Valley, I mean, you could say it's great. You could say it's bad. There's been some interesting matchups of teams that don't normally play each other. I mean, this is the marquee matchup of the season in that league. So
it was just some astute scheduling. I'll give them that. It was hard to know like how this was all going to factor out, and you can tell me it was all numerical and this was how it happened, just by happenstance. But whoever shuffled up the ping pong balls did a good job. I'll give them that because they put it right on the back end for us. I mean, there's no way of knowing. You might have a good idea, but it's very, very hard to say to yourself, okay, these two teams are probably going to go undefeated until week 9. Let's put them against each other in week 9. I mean, that happenstance just doesn't come together very often.
Yeah, good schedule work. AD's excellent. Whoever does the schedules for the Southwest, Southland, that new conference, well done on that. A little bit further south, another really good match between teams that I don't know if we've really talked a lot about on this podcast, but they're quietly just kind of churning along. Kankakee, Crete Moni. That's a really good matchup in that Southland neck of the woods. I went to Rich East a long time ago, and those were two really good programs back then as well. And Kankakee, man, I mean, I was looking at your preview this week, and they've just been, running over everybody in their path since they lost to Nazareth week 1. And oh, by the way, Crete Moni, I think they're averaging about 60 points in the last 6 games. What do you make of that matchup?
This is an interesting rivalry. I've been close to it for a very long time, and there was a period of time where Kankakee was not very good at football. They slowly got better, and then every year that they were slowly getting better, they'd get into that Crete Moni game, and Crete would smack them around and say, "Not yet, kid." But over the last 3 to 4 years, that has changed. It's been Kankakee has kind of established itself as the dominant one in that rivalry. So I'm sure they're hoping that trend continues. They've been really, really good. And I mean, even though they lost to Nazareth back in week 1, they made a very good acquitting for themselves. So it was one of those situations. Crete is kind of like snuck up on me. I know the rest of the Southland Conference is not very good, but I took a little pause when they started the season 0-2. I'm like, are they maybe taking a step back? And granted, like I said, Southland Conference has not been very strong other than Kankakee and Crete, but they have absolutely wrecked shop in their conference division games in preparation for this game. So I think it will be an interesting one. I think Kankakee is still a pretty substantial favorite in this one. I got some interesting information about Kankakee this week in regards to next season that I just picked up on. Next season, Kankakee is going to beef up their non-conference schedule significantly. They're keeping the Nazareth series, but in week 2, they'll be traveling to Lincoln Way East. So that's I tip my cap to Kankakee for testing themselves. Let's just put it that way.
So they're going Nazareth, Lincoln Way East the first 2 games of the season.
Correct. Yes.
All right. Well done. We like that. Whether they like it or not, we'll see. But we definitely like that.
Yes, indeed.
Another match that I like a lot this week in the Duquesne Conference, Geneva St. Charles North. If you like quarterbacks in this game, they got 2 really good ones. Tony Jahino for Geneva, Ethan Plum for St. Charles North. If you like wide receivers, they got some really good ones in this one. Talon Taylor for Geneva, and St. Charles North as well. Geneva is emerging as a team that, man, in the 6A bracket, outside of East St. Louis, I don't know if I want to see them. But, man, St. Charles North, they had that loss to Batavia, but they've just been quietly humming along since then. There's going to be a lot of points scored on Friday. Let's put it that way. What do you think about that game?
It should be really interesting. And you just gave him a little shout out there. But, if you would have told me before the season that this would be a battle of 2 pretty, substantial quarterbacks, I might have asked you who Tony Jahino is. But he has had an exceptional season. I mean, that really what it comes down to. It seems like every week I'm looking at a stat line and I'm going, whoa, that is pretty impressive. And I mean, a lot of people will say, yeah, but he's got great receivers, but he's doing the job. He's giving them the opportunity to succeed. He has had a fantastic year. That young man has done a really nice job. So, but and then you look on the other side, you've got another great quarterback on that side. It should be really fun. I mean, I was listening to you on your podcast earlier this week, talking about how you're going to check in every 5 minutes and expect to see a touchdown scored in the interim time that you checked in the last time. I can see that happening. Definitely, I think there's going to be some fireworks in that one.
No doubt. I mean, that league is funny. I cover a lot of games in the Southwest Parade Conference, and let's just say they play a little bit different brand of football down there, a little bit lower scoring games. And it's funny, following, Joel this year and Jake Bartleson before that. I mean, I get a little jealous sometimes when I see these 40 to 35 type games with the type of games that they played up there. But definitely expecting that this week, so it'll probably be 14-10.
Yeah, 7-3.
Exactly. another matchup involving teams that maybe people don't know a whole lot about, but they probably should. Duran, Pecatonica, and Seneca. Seneca churning along at 8-0, but Dupac, man, they're pretty good too. What do you know about those teams?
Seneca has been really impressive just doing what they do. It seems like every week I check in, 450 yards rushing, 500 yards rushing. It just seems like, they're one of those teams that says, this is what we do. We know what we're going to do. Go ahead, try and stop it. And no one has. They've been really, really good. There were a lot of people that thought that program was going to maybe fall off a little bit after last year's team. That they've really done a nice job of transitioning. Duran Pecatonica doesn't get a lot of attention. They're over there in the NUIC. They're in the shadow of Lena Winslow, and maybe a couple of other programs there. But consistently over the last 5 to 7 years, they've been a really, really good team that obviously gets moved up to 3A for playoff consideration. But, they have a very good quarterback this year in Cooper Hoffman. He's just a guy that just goes out and makes plays for them, either with his arm or with his legs. He's definitely a key cog in this game. I think this could be really interesting. I've asked some people that have seen both of them what they think of this game over the course of the last week or two. And I've gotten wildly disparaging comments from people that I know have experience with both of these programs. Some people think Seneca is going to win in a walk. Some people think Duran Pecatonica is. These are the fascinating games because it's a contrast in styles. You're going to have two different things going head-to-head here. Who comes out of this? I think Duran Pecatonica has had the benefit of playing a little bit better competition during the regular season, and it has had the advantage of being in some competitive games, and that might help them in this one.
Speaking of competitive games, East St. Louis playing a little team called IMG Academy this week. Where is that game and when is that game?
I believe that game is down there in Bradenton, Florida. I'm not completely positive of that. It's on Friday night. The only thing I've looked so far, I actually mean to check to see if it's on like ESPNU or something.
Yeah, right. That was my next question.
I haven't checked yet, but that's definitely a possibility. For those of you that don't know, IMG Academy is basically a sports academy that also serves as a high school. They lost their first game of the year. They have won every one of them since, and every national high school poll that I have seen to this point, they're at the very least in the top 5, and that is something that is a yearly occurrence with this program. So they play a nationally based schedule. They play all comers. This will be an immense challenge for East St. Louis, who, to be fair, has played a very strong schedule this year outside of their conference and has creepy of those rankings. But for them, if they are able to go down there and pick up that victory, that would be a very, very, very impressive feat because I'm expecting them to not be able to win that game. I do kind of expect them to be competitive in that, though.
Yeah, they had a competitive game last week with Edwardsville. That game, as expected, Edwardsville gave them a good game as they're wont to do. Just out of here, week 9. What are you going to be looking out for Friday night, and what people should be looking out for Friday night and into the wee hours of Saturday morning?
I was talking about this a little bit earlier in the week. We've only got 27 teams that are left in the state that are undefeated. And I think quite a few of those teams, aside from the 2 games that feature 8-0 against 8-0, I think quite a few of them might have their hands full this week. We mentioned East St. Louis with IMG Academy. I think there are some other ones out there, Sycamore and Cahokia. Duran Pecatonica has a loss. They're playing an undefeated Seneca team. I think there's a chance that we could get out of this week and we might only have 19, 20 left on that list. And that would be an unbelievably low amount of teams. And for a year that has provided me to use the word parity an awful lot, I think that would almost be fitting if that happened, that we would have so few teams to run the regular season without a loss. So that's something I'm keeping an eye on. And obviously a big specter on those 4-4 teams to see who gets in, who doesn't. Are we going to have 4 and 5 teams? Are we not? If we do, how many? That's all that information will start to get unveiled to us a lot on Friday night, completely on Saturday, and watching it all unfold is going to be fascinating.
A lot of fun. Week 9 is, I know we always look forward to week 1 because it's the beginning of the season, but there's nothing like week 9. Yep. Just for the madness and the insanity and the just the greatness of it. So really looking forward to it. Thanks everybody for joining us. Check out Thursday. JT Penalty, Eddie Criffio will be here for their South and West podcast. Great listen. You want to check it out. And then Steve will be here on Friday night with Matt Rodewald from 9:30 to 11, and it might go a little bit later than 11 on Friday night. So
just a few minutes later, I would guess.
A few minutes later.
Yeah.
Again, Steve Soucie, it's Josh Welge. Thanks again for joining us.